Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of I Remember Radio. I'm Chuck Street. I'm going to be the host of today's program, and we are going to focus on the life and career of Bruce Wayne, who was the eye in the sky, the traffic reporter for KFI 640 AM here in Los Angeles, and their sister station, Coast 103.5. Bruce was a career broadcaster. He was a New Hampshire native. He spent several years in Boston, actually doing traffic reporting in addition to reporting on sports and breaking news stories. But in Boston, he was a passenger in a helicopter. Later on, he became a pilot, mostly an airplane pilot, and took a vacation to Southern California, and of course, fell in love with the winters, which were quite mild compared to his experience in Boston. And he landed at KRNO in San Bernardino as a salesperson, and he convinced the general manager that they needed a traffic reporter out in the Inland Empire, and he volunteered to sell all the commercials that would sponsor his reports. He was there for 2 years, and then he came to the attention of KFI, and then ended up at KFI and Coast, and really became a fixture on the radio here in Los Angeles. He was on the station for 16 years. He would share his time between KFI and Coast 103. He was especially appreciated by morning host Lohman and Barkley, and of course on the air personalities who worked across the hall at Coast 103. Joining us today is a very distinguished group of broadcasters. First of all is sweet Dick Whittington, who really is a legend in Los Angeles radio, by far one of the most creative people I've ever heard on the radio. And he worked with Bruce Wayne at KFI, and he's going to share some terrific stories about his experiences coming up with really wacky promotions on the radio. And I think you're going to really enjoy that. Also joining us is Jhani Kaye, who is a legendary program director who had a long career in Los Angeles at the time of Bruce's passing. He was the program director of KFI and Coast 103. And we'll talk to him about some of his experiences with Bruce. And then also joining us is Mark Wallengren, another legendary broadcaster who was on Coast 103 for over 30 years. And most of that time as the morning host along with Kim Amadon, and really only had a short time working with Bruce because unfortunately he lost his life on the 4th of June, 1986. So let me start by talking with Jhani. Jhani, you were in management at the time of his passing. And what would you have to say about Bruce and the kind of broadcaster he was?
Well, he was an amazing man because he had to work that split shift. You know, he had to get up early in the morning, do the morning drive traffic, and then try to rest a little bit, refuel the plane, and fly again in the afternoon to do the afternoon show traffic. Recalling the day of Bruce's demise, I think it was Mark and Kim who called me, right, Mark?
Yes.
And you said you hadn't heard from Bruce. And that was the first phone call. And we all said, hang tight. He wasn't responding to any radio calls. And then you called me back and you said, there are reports of black smoke about a mile from the airport, Fullerton Airport. And that's when we really got concerned. It was quite a day. And sweet Dick, I'm not sure that you know about this or not, but Don Dalton, our general manager, had been absent from Los Angeles for the longest time because they asked him to go to Florida and help the Miami station. So he was the GM down there as well as in Los Angeles, and he'd been gone. And after you called me, Mark, to inform me there was smoke and it was probably Bruce, and everyone was surmising the same. I happen to think it was the day that Don Dalton was going to return to Los Angeles. And we always flew Delta at Cox. And I just got this idea to call Delta Airlines, the hub in Atlanta, and have him paged. And by God, I got a hold of him. He was in the airport. I said, Don, it looks like Bruce has gone down. what are we going to do? This and that. He goes, hang on, I'll be there in 3 or 4 hours. I'll come from LAX directly to the radio station and we'll discuss it. And Don came in, and by that time it had been confirmed that it was Bruce who had crashed. And he went around to make sure he said, I miss my kids. He kept going around and he saw all the air talent and the production people and other people behind the scenes. And I happened to be in my office, and my music director, or our music director, Liz Kiley, called me and said, Johnny, it's Dawn. You've got to get to the parking lot right now. I went running down the stairs, and Dawn had had a brain aneurysm getting into the limousine to go home. So in that one day, we had lost Bruce. It appeared that we were in the process of losing Don. He hadn't died, but he was certainly not doing well. And we were there until late in the evening. And Howard Neal was our sales manager then. And Cox Corporate in Atlanta called us, boy, somewhere between 8 and midnight. And suddenly I found myself as a station manager of both radio stations, and Howard Neal was elevated to general manager. So it was a real loss, a terrible day.
It was horrible, horrible.
Oh, I imagine.
And I don't know what it was like in the studio, Mark. Maybe you can address that.
Well, it's funny, Johnny, because I remember everything that day, and and during that time up through his funeral and everything, and I have mentioned his name, thousands of times over the years, but to hear you talk about it, it just puts me right back at that day. And it was a shitty day. It was horrible. And for me, I had grown up in Los Angeles, moved to Idaho to get into radio, sacrificed everything and quit like Bruce did in Boston and came back to LA. You were gracious enough to see something in me and gave me a job. And within 6 months, I found myself doing mornings in this legendary city with these legendary talents. I'm looking at across the glass. I'm now talking to Bruce Wayne. I had just started February of '86. It's the very beginning of my career. I'm just starting to develop a rapport on the air with Bruce. And that morning when, 6:06 and it's Bruce Wayne, eye in the sky. How's traffic? Bruce. And then, going on, Johnny always says forward momentum. We did, immediately called, checked in with KFI to see if they had heard anything, and no. And by the second traffic report, as my memory serves it was Chuck Street who, got word of a crash or smoke in that area. And Chuck, you were pretty close to the airport, as I recall at the time. Do you remember what time you first talked about it?
I don't remember, but I think by then I was a traffic reporter for 102.7 KISS FM.
Yes, correct.
And we'd heard, I was already flying. I've been flying for maybe a half hour that morning. And we heard reports of an airplane crash near Fullerton Airport. So obviously I headed beeline to that scene. And I think the tower might have suggested that it was Bruce when I got into the airspace. And by then there was still a big column of black smoke at the crash site, which was about a quarter of a mile to the east of the airport. And so that really shook me. That's for sure, because I had gotten to know Bruce previously. I considered him a mentor. I used to go and see him occasionally at Fullerton Airport, and then wait for him to come back. He was pretty consistent about 10 minutes after 9. And, I would ask him questions about getting into traffic reporting. And sometimes he would invite me over to the airport cafe for a cup of coffee. And we talked more about that and, what the job involved. But let's talk about Bruce's personality. One of the things I remember about Bruce, I really appreciated his professionalism. I think he took his pilot duties seriously. I know he took his broadcasting duties seriously, and he had an infectious laugh. He had that laugh that was, I mean, at the very least, you smiled when you heard that laugh. And sometimes you laughed because of the zany things that he was doing with people like Dick Whittington, who's with us today. Dick, would you like to talk about your experiences with Bruce? Because he was really a co-conspirator in some of the zany stunts that you were involved in. I think they came out of your brain, and he was a willing participant. And one of the things that really is, I'll call it legendary, is when you decided to do something with the city of Redlands out in the Inland Empire. And I think at that time we had, for the most part, the Cold War with Russia in our rearview mirror. And of course, that was communism. And we know that the communism, the word red was connected to communism. And of course, red was part of the name of Redlands. Can you tell us about that zany stunt that came out of your fertile mind, and then how that transpired?
Well, first of all, yes, and thank you. First of all, I want to know why, and perhaps Jhani Kaye can tell me, what did you actually see in Mark Wallengren?
You know, Dick, I learned not to answer his phone calls if he called me early in the morning. He also woke me up to say, turn on the TV now on 9/11.
Yeah. But let me just say this very quickly, and then we'll get back to Bruce.
Yeah.
Johnny was a guy who said, don't you ever not let me know something's going on. If I hear it from somebody above me, that I want to be prepared anytime something would happen. So he trained all of us to make sure you call him first. But I will say there was a sick joy in being able to wake him up at 6:05 in the morning.
Very good.
All right, well, Dick, pick it up from there, okay?
All right. As probably most people know, I am the mouth that pours. When payola was discovered and then was banned, I decided there's no sense in my playing any more records. There's nothing for me in this. So my mouth started. Now, actually, I've been very fortunate, and meeting Bruce Wayne, and we got to know each other very well, in that he could tell a wonderful story. He really was quite good at telling stories, and I enjoyed listening to him tell stories. We did a few things. One would be Redlands, and other would be Mount Baldy. And if you want, I can talk about that later. But I decided at that point in time that I was going to run for vice president. Why? I have no idea. And I didn't consider them stunts. I have to say this. To me, they were real. The thoughts were real. I really pursued them. I wasn't really interested in any outside input. This was in my head. And everything that I did or didn't do was real to me. And so as a consequence, running for vice president just seemed like a hell of a good idea at that time, with slogans like, let's put the vice back in vice president. Lying is good. Graft is greed, and things that would interest people in my being vice president. Well, a part of the campaign, of course, was the communists. We don't call them communists back then. We call them communists. I got that from a Georgian. And as a consequence, Redlands, of course, it eventually came to mind. I had done other things with the Red Book, et cetera, et cetera. But Redlands just seemed like a natural thing to do. Let's get the red out of Redlands. And this was coincidental with a big campaign for Visine eye drops to
get the red out.
Yeah, get the red out. Exactly. Where does Brucey come in here? Bruce just accepted. He never questioned. He would smile. I'd go out to the airport in Fullerton there, and we didn't have a conversation much about it. We were going to do it. And I think that he must have assumed my frame of mind. This is real. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's don't do this as a stunt. Let's do this. And so we did. We flew out to Redlands, and I had this bottle of Visine. And from the window of the plane, I started squeezing the bottle, and we were getting the red of the Redlands. What was so wonderful about it all is that Bruce, again, he was a part of it. He just wasn't the pilot. He just didn't stand by. He got involved. And I like that because that was very, very helpful to me. So that was essentially what we did there. It got far more attention than I really knew about. Our director here, Mike, told me of the subsequent newspaper happenings and people talking about it and what have you. But since we're talking about Bruce, and I don't really want to put too much spotlight out on myself unless these two get out of the way, and then I can just be me. No, as a human being, I enjoyed him very much. He was just so easy to talk to. And we never had any words about anything. And he was good with everybody. He treated everybody the same. And that was something that I admired about the man. So that's in essence. I don't want to take a whole hour here, unless you want me to.
Well, and I would like to say this about Dick in relation to Bruce. What was amazing about you is, you know, with so many screamers on the radio, here was, you know, Dick Whittington, who was just Dick. I mean, and which is now what everybody aspires to be on the radios, to be their own personality. And Bruce always was, even though he took on that famous Bruce Wayne. What was amazing about him with you, and then with Lohman and Barkley, and with Mark and Kim, is that he absolutely fit like a glove with everything. And, you know, if you were, you know, whack out there comedy, he could be right there and kind of, pardon the pun, bring you in for a landing for the likes like Kim and I, two young broadcasters starting this male-female thing, which was brand new to the market as this equally kind of, you know, and just regular folks in a living room. My God, he could make a bit just complete and just set it out and then move right on to traffic. And he really had a larger than life personality. And Jhani, I don't know if you remember, but it was the Christmas party of 1985 that Lohman and Barkley, it was my first time ever at a major market Christmas party. We didn't have those. We got gift certificates to Taco Bell in Idaho. You know, it was this extravagant affair. Lohman and Barkley hosted. And here is Bruce also getting up. And his wife, Lois, was also this larger than life personality. I mean, you know, it was intimidating to be around him.
Mm-hmm.
One thing about Bruce, I loved his signature. He just had a cadence and an inflection to Bruce Wayne, KFI in the sky. And he really made that KFI in the sky a moniker for the radio station. And what's also amazing, Dick, about what he did for you and Lohman and Barkley and all the others, he could laugh and play along, and he listened. He knew what the content was before the traffic report. I went flying with him once. He quickly landed at Van Nuys Airport. I had to jump in from this restaurant. He goes, I got to go, because he had another report. And I was amazed. He had to listen to 4 things in 2 ears. And he had notes and clipboards on both of his legs, right by his kneecap. And he's making notes and he's looking out. I don't know how he had time to fly the plane. He was doing so much for two radio properties. He was amazing, and he was a nice guy. And Mark, I don't know if you were, I believe you were there, or maybe it was a KFI only party at Don Dalton's. It was like 2 months, guys, before he passed.
Yeah.
And I've got him speaking to our news guy, Bob Kerr. And he's saying, I'm going to hang it up before something awful happens. And I found that recently. I put it on YouTube. I think you can find it if you just search for Bruce Wayne or Don Dalton.
Hmm.
But when I saw that just this last year, it's been sitting on a shelf forever. It just shocked me that he was talking about his own possible death in those words, and then it happened.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, he
Wow.
was only 52. He was only
Yeah.
52, which is, and certainly in the prime of his career.
Oh, that's a point I'd like to make. He was just a couple of months away. He was always called the Dean of LA traffic reporters. And that's on his tombstone over here at Forest Lawn.
Really?
And what luck, I mean, I don't know if it's luck, but what a coincidence. It wasn't planned this way. He is one space away from Don Dalton. They were buried just one space away. I go up there all the time and visit him. But Bruce was only months away or weeks away from being the first radio traffic pilot to make 25 years.
Wow.
And I wish he had made that anniversary.
Yeah.
Another story,
Yeah.
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 I have to tell you another story about him. This was different from the Redlands. The idea occurred to me, Mount Baldy, which of course has been there forever. And so the idea was there, let's get some hair for Mount Baldy. So I had asked the audience if they would send in some hair. Unfortunately, they did. It came in by boxes. But the point was that we were going to fly over Mount Baldy and airdrop
Drop their hair.
the top. Juicy Brucey, as I called him, Juicy Brucey, he starts laughing. And the reason is not that that was so funny, but the idea was I started at the same time because he was rising, and I'm not a pilot, you would understand this better, but he was rising and there was less oxygen in the plane. And so we couldn't control ourselves. We just started giggling, looking at each other, and we couldn't stop. In the meantime, he's kind of drifting and he's not aware of it. And I'm not aware of it because I didn't know whether or not he was doing the right thing or not until he finally caught himself and we started really drifting. And he then came alive, came back to reality and straightened up the plane. But what was so funny was the two of us laughing our fool heads off. And this is all going out over the air. It's all live. And we couldn't stop it. We knew it was unprofessional. People probably thought, oh, they think they're so clever. And that wasn't it at all. It was just a lack of oxygen. He had that sense of humor. He understood humor. And I think he understood us all. Loman and Barkley, me, I suppose, Hudson and Landry.
Yeah.
All part of that that format that failed, but nevertheless, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
He could work with each of us and understand our personalities, understand who we were, why we were. And I was so impressed with that. I was impressed with him. I really was, because there was nothing fake about this man. He was Bruce Wayne. He wasn't Bruce Wayne, of course. That wasn't his real name. But the point is that he was Bruce Wayne, and we would accept that just because he was that kind of a person.
And Dick, don't you think that the best radio moments almost in your career would be those unprofessional moments?
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
They're the best. We always worry about this professionalism, but yet the magic really happens in those so-called, what we think are unprofessional moments.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you.
And the
Jhani,
station treated him.
as a program director, you need to keep the air staff focused, right? And so you're expecting professionalism. So what was it like? I mean, Bruce, again, would go along with all of it, and he was still professional. I guess when we're dealing with like Dick Whittington, who anything could happen. You could be doing a remote broadcast from a porta potty and make it sound entertaining.
I never had to tell Bruce to edit. He knew how to do it in the fewest amount of words and get to the punchline quickly. And the station, I'm really proud of this fact. This came from Don Dalton and Jim Wesley before him. The station always considered that a 3-person morning show, actually 4 with Bob DeMont, who was the engineer at the time.
That's right.
And in the lobby, if you remember, Mark, We had all those pictures hanging behind the receptionist. Bruce was up there with the plane.
That's right. He sure was. Yeah.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Do you remember, does anyone remember the funeral? When I say that, I don't mean disrespectfully. After the ceremony or the services, I happened to be standing with Loman in the back, and it was jammed. The chapel was jammed, if you recall. And his wife, Lois, who by herself was a character. I mean, a great character. Lovely woman, but somewhat aggressive. She came down off of the altar, down into the aisle, and thanked everyone, which I thought was lovely. And she had the kind of a voice which carried, even though we were jammed in there. So she finished her thank yous and then went into a long-winded infomercial, in my mind, I call, of how we could sustain the Bruce Wayne legend by hiring her. This was what she was about. You remember this?
I remember
as a
distinctly.
reporter. I'm sorry?
Dick, I'm sorry to interrupt. I remember distinctly, but I want to correct one little thing.
Yes.
The person who brought that up at the funeral was Mark, who's the famous female attorney here in LA.
Gloria
Gloria
Allred.
Allred?
Gloria Allred.
I don't
went up-
remember her being there.
She went up to speak and she goes, and she's looking, I think, at me, because she wasn't, she was looking at the crowd, but being the program director, she goes,
Right.
I think it would only be right if we continued the legacy with Lois Lane.
Yes.
And with that, I'm.
Well, you know,
Loman, I'm just finish this for a second. Loman and I started laughing because we knew what she was doing, and I applauded her for it in my mind, but we couldn't stop laughing, so we actually had to leave the chapel. Really, nobody understood that except maybe a few people in the chapel.
I walked out too because I was embarrassed. I thought everyone was going to turn to me and go, "Yeah, that's a great idea."
Yeah.
hey, well, listen, you know what? Chuck Street. I mean, I remember Lois. Bruce is down. He's gone. The plane. We know it's his plane. Lois shows up at the crash site, and we're throwing her on the air at KFI. Jhani did not allow Kim and I to put Lois on the air.
Good.
But KFI ran with her on the air, and she was like, I mean, imagine, you know, you're a widow and you're reporting, and she's turning into a news reporter and a broadcaster.
Mhm.
I mean, Chuck, it was odd. It was odd.
She was auditioning.
Maybe that's how it all ties into the.
I think so.
By the way, she has a great voice. She could have
Oh,
probably,
yeah.
graphic, especially in today's environment.
Yeah.
I think he would have enjoyed it. I mean, I really feel that Juicy Brucey would have enjoyed
Oh
it.
yeah.
That of it.
And they were great together. Anybody know of Lois? I've lost all touch.
I ran into her a couple of years back, and I can't remember the situation now.
Yeah.
Well, I just remember, of course, circling the crash site as a traffic reporter for KISS FM. And of course, spent a lot of time there, and I was quite emotional. In fact, Rick D sent word up. He said, maybe you should land. You sound a little bit too emotional.
Yeah.
So I pulled myself together. But I remember I was between doing my reports on KISS FM, and Rick Dees was very gracious talking about Bruce and what a great broadcaster he was, which I think everybody appreciated that.
You
But
can do that when you have a 16 share.
That's true.
Pretty hot. But
I was a great fan. I've never met Rick Dees. Since we're on that for a second, I admire what he did. And of course, the ratings, but he was a gentleman. He sent me, I suppose you could call it a fan letter. I once married the Queen Mary to the King of Long Beach, which was a tugboat. I will look at that. But he wrote a full page to me, and I've never had anybody else in this business do that. And I was so moved. Was he a nice guy or is he a nice guy? I don't know him at all.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure he was very sincere when he did that. Yes. He certainly appreciated other broadcasters who came before him and who really were legends like yourself. So I'm sure that he was very sincere about that.
And then I'll tell you about the radio broadcasters that followed him and you know what he did. He was a nice enough guy. The first time I ever met him, I had finally, the Mark and Kim show had beaten Rick Dees in the morning, 25-54. One of the many broadcasts, he was at the Four Seasons in Hawaii. I happened to be vacationing there with my family. I was off for a round of golf, and who is sitting in the Four Seasons limo on the way to play golf but Rick Dees? I am sitting here going, I mean, it's Rick Dees, right? I introduce myself and I say, you know, I'm Mark Wallengren, the Mark and Kim show, and it's such an honor to meet you. And he goes, now, what do you do? Who are you? It was like he pretended not to know me. And I was told later that he did it on purpose because when I got the job, he sent me a note, Dick, and he said, hey, congratulations on getting the morning show. Don't do too well. I still have that note. I mean, it's all fine, but you know, it's like, he definitely had a side. There's no doubt about it. But one can't argue his incredible success. I mean, you know.
But there's a question here that I think perhaps all of us would like to ask. You stayed at the Four Seasons Hotel. You were making that kind of money.
You know what? I defer to Jhani Kaye and Cox Media, my attorney, and I go silent.
And I'm very proud of this fact, Dick. Kim Amadon made dollar for dollar everything that Mark made.
We were the first equally billed, equally paid morning hosts in the United States of America. And when you turn on the radio today and there's a male, female, they're all modeled after ultimately the Mark and Kim show. And that was, you know, I mean, that's a whole other subject as to how this guy thought, I've got an idea, you know. Anyway, it changed radio. And, you know, back to Bruce, what's fascinating about that is when you have, you know, guys like Dick Whittington and Lohman and Barclay, the legends that he worked for, and you know how radio was kind of changing in a way, and they were influenced by the type of radio that Dick Whittington was doing, and this more natural approach and getting away from that whole radio thing. You know, Dick was. I mean, but Bruce was all part of that whole thing, and I feel blessed to have gotten into radio and to be here in Los Angeles and have these what I call living legends. Some of them no longer with us, but to actually grow up admiring them like I did, and then actually being able to work and have conversations and meet all these heroes of mine, including Bruce Wayne, was an incredible experience.
There is a story that I have heard. I don't know whether you've heard it or not, but the story was that Jhani Kaye, the program director, resented the fact that you both were making far more money than probably.
No, that was Johnny's contract with Cox that said no one will make more money in the company than me, except Jim Kennedy, as I recall.
No, yeah, Don Dalton had the same philosophy. It's Jim Tabor, who was my general manager at K-Rock and later in Texas. He goes, I will never, as long as you're the program director, no air talent will make more than you. He goes, it may only be $100.
Yeah.
you will earn more.
You will have bragging rights. You will have bragging rights.
That's great.
Chuck, I don't know if you know this. I wanted to fly helicopters at one time. And I actually took a couple lessons out from Whiteman Airport. And I was speaking to Bruce about it. And this is when he brought up a couple of stories I didn't know. One was he could fly both fixed wing and helicopters, he said. He was licensed. He goes, you really don't want to know how to fly both, because in an emergency, in a fixed wing, you want to pull back. But you want to go into auto rotate in a helicopter and push forward. Am I correct?
Well, you reduce the collective, which flattens the pitch on the rotor blades so that you're in a glide So if you lost an engine, you don't want to have any pitch in those blades because if you don't have an engine turning, the rotor system, the rotor system is going to slow down and then stall out, and then you're like a lawn dart.
Yeah.
And I think
what
both Dick and I just crashed with that because we had no idea. That was like science.
Oh,
Well, this is really interesting. He told me, and I think I have the story correct. On the internet, it seems to be a little bit different, but he told me that he once was just a reporter, not the pilot, in Boston, for a radio station. And they went down in the harbor. And the pilot basically said, "You're on your own." And he swam for shore, and left Bruce behind with a broken arm or something. Is that true? Does anyone know that story?
I read something similar to that. I do think that that was his first crash. He'd been in a crash before, and I know it was Boston. Yeah, that's crazy. I think it's even crazier that he liked the weather. Not crazy that you like the weather in California and you want to leave Boston, but the fact that he came here with no job and then got a job as a salesperson out in the Inland Empire in San Bernardino and was selling time, and then basically talked his way into flying and doing commercials in the airplane. I mean, it was brilliant. And Chuck, was he the first one to fly and report in Los Angeles, or had that been done before?
No, that had been done before with people like Captain Max Schumacher, who flew for KMPC.
Oh, yes, right.
Then, so Max was a Marine vet and a pilot reporter. And then, of course, John McElhaney from KMPC, he was a retired police pilot. And then, of course, Pamela McInnes, who flew an airplane. She covered Orange County for KMPC, and she was a airplane pilot and a very, very good reporter.
Very good one. Yeah, she worked with me. She worked with me also. She was a remarkable person in that no matter what you fed her, she could come back immediately. In other words, I would start a stream of consciousness about something, and she could pick it up. And she was just absolutely remarkable. And one time at Van Nuys Airport, her engine gave out, and she was coming in for the landing, and her boyfriend, who was a commercial airline pilot, happened to be at the airport. And I'll never forget the picture of Pamela coming down, and you could hear the terror in her voice. I mean, it was there. And he ran down the runway behind the plane, of course, and so kept talking to her. She couldn't hear him, but he was shouting up to her, "Babes, do blah, blah, blah," whatever to do to get down. She got down, obviously, of course, but she was very good. And I'm sorry to get away from Brucey. I didn't mean to do that.
Well, it's just, all of these people that fly, and some of us remember most of them. Some of us only remember a few. Bruce Wayne certainly has a name that is very, you remember the name Bruce Wayne, but incredible broadcasters that were so important to our daily lives for commuters. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing a morning show without a plane. And then we eventually went no planes. Everybody's doing it on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck, do you have any idea how many hours of flying he might have, put together over all those years?
I think it was over 30,000 hours.
Woo.
So that's a lot. I was able, during my career, was able to log 24,000 hours.
Wow.
And I added all those hours up, and it added up to over 3 years of continuously being in the sky. So he had over 30,000 hours. And then Mike Nolan, I think, was 30 to 35,000.
I think Mike Nolan just told me that he had flown to the moon and back twice. I mean, and he would call it, he said, I've got a 13-hour workday with a 5-hour lunch, something like that.
You were talking about that gap between the morning traffic and the afternoon traffic. I remember Bill Keane worked that schedule from the studio at KNX, and he referred to that break. He said he had the world's longest lunch hour.
Yeah.
where he spent at a bar. With a
Yeah,
couple of
exactly.
people from KNX.
With some of his other colleagues at KNX. Yes, that's
Yeah.
but it's a tough shift. I appreciated. I did the split for 20 years, and then just mornings for 8 years.
Mm.
But I appreciated having that time off during the middle of the day because you could do errands, you could do your banking, go to the cleaners when there wasn't much of a crowd. Sometimes they'd go to the beach, and then you would get back to the airport, but you could never totally relax because you knew you had to go back to 100%. There was not going to be any adult beverages over lunch.
And I would like to ask, because Jhani brought it up, flying with Bruce Wayne and watching, how he did it with, notes on both laps and listening to four things. For you, Chuck, because you right there, what is that like when you're sitting trying to pay attention to all that and having all this coming at you? What's going through there? I can't imagine 2 hours I'd be done. I gotta sit down and I'm done for the day.
Well, first of all, keeping the schedule. Keeping the schedule, because if you're going to work a morning show, you're going to get up, and this well, you've got to go to bed early.
Right.
Which I did. I was usually in bed by 9 o'clock, and then I get up at 4:15. So that's tough. You finished your last shift at 6 p.m. on Friday, which meant you had to be back in the seat on Monday morning.
It's a short weekend.
It is a short weekend. After I'd been doing the traffic for about 15 years, it came time for a contract renewal, and I didn't ask for a raise. I said, I just want Friday afternoons off so that I could have a jump on the weekend. And at that time, we were really into boating at the Colorado River at Lake Havasu, and we would get an early start for the lake, with the kids. But back to it's a very stressful environment because you are flying the aircraft. You're responsible for talking to the towers and getting permission to transition through airspace. You're listening to the CHP scanner. Somebody's occasionally speaking to you from the newsroom. And then you also are trying to communicate with other aircraft in the sky. So you're listening to the aviation frequency, and then you try to listen to the stations that you're recording for.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how you did it. And then at the those last 6 years, as I recall, when it was the Pepsi sponsorship that you had, it was, I think that at that point they were starting to pull people out of the air already and just ground them, and we're going to cost save and stuff. And you remarkably managed to get that Pepsi sponsorship and stay flying for another 6 years. If you really dive into the story of that of itself is an incredible success story.
Well, again, I had the Pepsi sponsorship, and the last probably 10 years, it didn't cost the radio station anything for me and the aircraft. Because
you were the one who was doing all the work. They were getting all the benefits. Corporate radio.
So the last year that I did the split shift for 20 years. And so the last year that I did the split, and I know this is about Bruce, I did 67 appearances, most of them with the helicopter, which meant going there ahead of time, sometimes getting permits from the municipalities, and I worked 20 weekends. So then when it came up for contract renewal, and I was really nervous about this, I said, I want to give up afternoons. And so I talked to our boss, and he didn't realize I was that busy because I did a lot of stuff for Pepsi, our sponsor. But that leads me to the fact that in addition to what Bruce was doing, is that he did a lot of stuff in the community. He was the grand marshal of numerous parades. He was at shopping center events. He was really busy. And here at Fullerton, they have a monument to Bruce, which they just moved, by the way, last week. It's going to reappear inside the terminal. What it says on that monument is Bruce Wayne, great friend of Fullerton, because he did a lot of events, not only at Fullerton, but all over the Southland. So that was part of his thing. And, he was really a true air personality.
Yeah.
And well thought of by so many people. So Dick, it looks like you have something to add.
No, I was just going to say, he did all of this, and you're absolutely on the nose with a description of him. But one thing he never did, and I'm going to stress this because I think it's terribly important. He never stayed at the Four Seasons in those days. And I never did either. Damn it.
Neither did I.
Yeah.
Tell me that.
Yeah, I don't even know how that happened. I think that the station was trying to work out a Rick Dees deal there, and they sent me. Only went for 4 days. It was the coldest time of the year in Hawaii. It rained the whole time. I took my mother-in-law. I mean, come on. What kind of fun could I have possibly had, right, Chuck? Look at where he
But it should have been even more miserable.
Oh, Dick.
So we're getting ready to conclude this broadcast. I'm going to go around again. Mark, is there anything you'd like to say before we conclude about Bruce Wayne, the amazing pilot and broadcaster?
Just the fact that, again, I was a young broadcaster, and having grown up with him, my stepdad, who was a television writer producer, who did Wonderful World of Disney. Actually, he was on the NBC Blue Network, and he did a little show called Laramie on the radio, was hired by Universal in the late 50s to, come here. He was working at KTAR radio, writing for the NBC Blue Network. And he came here, and his favorite radio personality, and he talked to me about this all the time. Have you met Dick Whittington yet? Dick loved your radio broadcast, the years at KGIL, loved you. And he also loved Gary Owens too, which was interesting. So he was doing KMPC in the afternoons and Dick in the morning. But to have this young broadcaster be around these greats, and just to see you, Dick, I just hope you know how many people that you've touched and how blessed we are to still have you around, giving everybody a world of crap. I just love it. And I love that you gave it to me today. This will be a treasured moment for the rest of my days.
Well, Dick, what do you have to say for yourself?
You say I have touched you. I wish I could say that about Barbara, who's in the room. I haven't touched her in 25 years. Not because I couldn't, but because she won't let me.
Yeah.
You're a lucky man.
This is what I got to look forward to.
I've enjoyed meeting all of you, Jhani, and of course, Mark, and you, Dick. Yes, I did enjoy you.
Especially Dick.
Yes, especially you, Chuck. It was very nice meeting all of you. I really do appreciate this.
Well, thank you very much. So, Jhani, anything else you want to say as we conclude here about the amazing Bruce Wayne?
It was a wonderful opportunity. I mean, these are people, Loman Barkley, Bruce Wayne, that my parents listened to way out in Hemet, where you could barely get the signal of KFI.
Yeah.
And to become his program director was, I couldn't conceive what that was like. And you knew you were working with a great air talent, because in all the years I worked with him, I had to give him this many notes. There was nothing, no criticism. I didn't have to tell him tighten it up, make it shorter. He just did it naturally and off the cuff, and it was his personality, and it worked.
I wish I could say the same.
Good for you, Jhani.
Now, just to clarify, you're saying the same. What you mean is that Jhani.
I don't know who that Jhani Kaye is. Okay, whoever that guy is.
They gave me a car phone. I had to call someone.
Oh my God, he did. He had a first car phone, and I'm sure I cost him thousands at 99 cents a minute.
All right. Well, listen, thank you, all of you, for participating in today's discussion about the amazing Bruce Wayne. He was amazing. And thank you for filling in some of the blanks about his personality and his professionalism and all of that. So that concludes this episode of I Remember Radio. Thank you again for joining us. Today's program was produced and edited by Mike Kunert. Until next time, we'll see you then.
At KFI, and time to update traffic with Bruce Wayne. Bruce?
And an update on the east side. We're starting to show definite improvement now. The inbound Pomona Freeway fast all the way. There's occasional slowing on the San Bernardino Freeway from Del Mar over past Atlantic, where we have a stalled vehicle on the right shoulder. Northbound Santa Ana Freeway slows from just north of the 605 interchange and occasionally slow up toward East Los Angeles. On the Santa Monica Freeway eastbound east of Hoover, a stall in the number 1 lane. At Santa Monica is busy from the San Diego Freeway to Crenshaw. It'll take 18 minutes to drive from the San Diego interchange into the harbor. On the harbor northbound, the slowing is from Century up to Vernon. Northbound San Diego has a lump in it from Crenshaw to Hawthorne. A Ventura Freeway at Valley Circle. Report of a CHP motorcycle down. Units are checking that out right now. Hollywood Freeway is heavy from south of the Ventura down past the construction area south of Highland. And the inbound Pasadena just has a little slowing from south of the Golden State heading into the 4-level interchange. Bruce Wayne, KFI in the sky.
I want to say to Bob what I said on the air Friday afternoon. Steve LeBeau said, well, Bob is retiring after all these years. And I said on the air, right from my heart, I said that in the early days of KFI in the Sky, when I was, if you'll pardon the expression, just trying to get it off the ground, Bob was the spirit behind KFI in the Sky. And there was nobody that worked harder or more consistently to feed the information up in the airplane than Bob did. So Bob, for all those great years together, thank you, and I consider you a true friend. This 4th of July, I will have been doing traffic reports for 25 years. Okay, and I'm watching very carefully for signs of burnout, and it may be 10 years, maybe 5,